Hello and welcome to the Fifth Down Huddle. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's go right away and huddle up. So due to the length of this episode, and as you can tell by the title, I am doing the NFC predictions, I won't be able to fit all of my thoughts on Jameis Winston in today, but it will be the focus of next week's episode. Now, I've been very interested and surprised by what I've been seeing with him, but I'll wait to share it with you until next week. So thank you guys so much for supporting the podcast, and now let's hop right into my NFC predictions. Now, if you watched my last week podcast, you'll know how this is going to go. I'm going to highlight each division by itself, going through the team's record and then their most notable offseason moves and how I think that affects their team compared to last year. So we're going to start out here with the NFC North, and we'll go right ahead and start with the Packers. And I have the Packers winning the NFC North at 11-5. Now, they signed linebacker Christian Kirksey, tackle Rick Wagner, wide receiver Devin Funchess, and they re-signed Mason Crosby and Tyler Ervin. But they did lose Jimmy Graham, the tight end. He's a great tight end, and it was a tough loss. Now, they've got a nice addition in Christian Kirksey defensively, and it seems they made up for at least some of the loss of Jimmy Graham. I mean, Jimmy Graham is a great target for Aaron Rodgers to hit, as well as a great blocker. And it seems they made up for at least some of that great target aspect with another wide receiver behind Davante Adams in Devin Funchess, who, while he is no number one target in this league, he is still a nice, versatile number two threat. And I like that, and I like how the Packers are sitting right now. I like their team. They didn't lose too much. And they didn't gain too much either. I think they'll sit at right around the same skill set. They have a little bit of a tougher schedule this year, though. So I have them sitting at 11-5. Now, second in the NFC North, comes to no surprise, is the Vikings. Now, they extended Kirk Cousins and their Pro Bowl fullback, C.J. Ham. They re-signed Dakota Dozier, guard center Brett Jones, their running back Amir Abdullah, punter Britton Colquitt, and a few other bench warmers. And then they lost Stephon Diggs, cornerback Trey Waynes, defensive tackle Linval Joseph, cornerback Xavier Rhodes, guard Josh Klein, defensive end Everson Griffin, and cornerback Mackenzie Alexander. Now, one thing you notice from that is that they lost 3 cornerbacks. That's a big loss to take. They also lost a big-time defensive end in Everson Griffin and a big-time deep threat in Stephon Diggs. Now, they signed on Tajay Sharp to what I suppose is to help fill that gap of Stephon Diggs in the pass game. Now, it won't be an immediate fit because, as we know, Tajay Sharp is no Stephon Diggs, but it will help in repairing what seems to be a broken receiving core right now. They also signed on defensive end Anthony Zettel, again, possibly to help fill that gap of Everson Griffin. Now, it's very hard to replace some of the players they lost, so don't expect those positions to be better or even the same as they were last year, but do expect that they won't take too much of a hit from those. My main reason for this is, despite all their losses, they had some decent gains as well. And although what is obvious is that the losses outweigh the gains, what will keep this loss-filled offense at 11-5 is the new offensive coordinator Gary Kubiak. I feel like the talent at Minnesota offensively has been widely wasted through poor play calling, and I feel like Kubiak can change that. Now, defensively, they won't be as strong, but it won't kill them. I don't believe it'll kill them. They have a good coach in Zimmer, and I believe he will find a way to make that defense worth something. So then we move on to the third team in the NFC North, which is the Chicago Bears. Now, they signed on defensive back Trey Robertson, tight end Demetrius Harris, linebacker Danny Trevathan. They got tight end Jimmy Graham from the Packers, defensive end Brett Urban, defensive back Deion Bush, defensive back Jordan Lucas, defensive back DeAndre Houston, O-lineman German Ifedi, linebacker Robert Quinn, defensive end Roy Robertson, defensive back Sherrick McManus, and a few other bench warmers. And they lost Trey Burton, who is a very solid tight end, linebacker Leonard Floyd, defensive back Prince Amukamara, and wide receiver Taylor Gabriel. So it's an interesting situation for the Bears because they signed on a lot of players, but not a ton of big-name guys. And what I mean by big-name guys is guys who are really solid starters that can improve your team. They didn't sign a ton of those guys. It seemed they tried to make up for the losses of Trey Burton, Leonard Floyd, and Prince Amukamara, and wide receiver Taylor Gabriel, despite the fact that they didn't sign another wide receiver, which I think they should at least draft one. and they traded for Foles as well. Now, different than the Vikings, the gains definitely outweigh the losses, although I do feel like there will be some quarterback controversy holding them out of the playoffs. Now, I believe at some point Trubisky's going to be benched. He's not a great quarterback. He's not great at all. He shouldn't have been drafted as high up as he was. And obviously his talent has not shifted to the Bears very nicely. I mean, last year he had a few games where he had some nice games. But despite those flashes of greatness, he has not shown that he can sustain it. And I believe that due to that, at some point this upcoming season, he will be benched for Foles, and Foles will then eventually be benched for Trubisky. Again, I feel like it'll be kind of a switch back and forth. And it'll be a large storyline for the Bears, probably the largest one, and it's ultimately going to be what holds back the Bears from winning. I think that they'll win more games with Foles than they do with Trubisky. But I do also believe that Foles will at some point flutter out and lose a couple games in a row, throw a lot of picks, and then Trubisky is going to be forced back in. So then we move on to last in the NFC North. Something that doesn't come to surprise to a lot of people nowadays are the Lions. Now, they signed a lot of players. Offensive tackle, Vitae, offensive tackle. Linebacker Jamie Collins from the Patriots, defensive tackle Nick Williams, quarterback Chase Daniel, defensive tackle Danny Shelton, cornerback Desmond Trufant, safety Jerrion Kearse, wide receiver Jeremy Davis, linebacker Reggie Ragland, linebacker Elijah Lee, wide receiver Geronimo Allison, cornerback Darryl Roberts. They traded for the Patriots safety Duron Harmon, but they also lost an offensive guard in Graham Glasgow, a running back in J.D. McKissick, and a defensive tackle, Nashawn Robinson, as well as a backup tight end in Logan Thomas. Now, they gained a lot of nice talent. I mean, truly. I mean, you look at it, Danny Shelton, Desmond Trufant, Jamie Collins, Vitae. Those are all great, solid starters. Even Nick Williams is. But on the other side of it, and also Duron Harmon, can't forget about that, but also on the other side of it, it's going to be interesting to see how the season plays out. I see the Lions ceiling at maybe 8-8, 9-7. Do they get there? Maybe. But if I had to bet my money on how often the Lions hit their ceiling, I would say no. That's why I have them at 6-10 and last in the NFC North. I'd love to say that these improvements are going to finally pay out for Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford's going to have a decent team around him. He's going to be able to make a run for the playoffs. But just with the Lions' history, when they do have talent, I just don't feel like it's going to pan out the way that hype often says it will. So then we move on to the NFC South. And we look at first in the NFC South, comes to no surprise, the Saints at 12-4. Now, they kept Drew Brees as the main man, re-signing their top guard, and they brought in Emmanuel Sanders, as well as Malcolm Jenkins, DJ Swearinger, Noah Spence, and a few other benches. So the Saints got better. They definitely did, and they will make another playoff run this year. They're going to make a stronger one than last year. In a few weeks from now, you'll hear my playoff spots for them and how far I think they'll go. But the Saints will at least make a playoff run for the Super Bowl. And they're sitting at 12-4 there. But then the more interesting team in the NFC South, which I have at number 2, are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They re-signed linebacker Kevin Minter. They agreed to terms with tackle Joe Haig. They signed a few other bench warmers, as well as re-signing outside linebacker Jason Pierre-Paul. But the whole thing with the Bucs is Brady. Brady. The Bucs signed Tom Brady, and it will make their season. Brady has something to prove. I mean, that's something with Brady. Whenever he has something to prove, I mean, you look at when he was suspended for 4 games, he went on and won the Super Bowl. Every single time in which he has been shot down, he has come right back and made something happen. You look at the Super Bowl against the Rams, he did not have a stellar offense at all. Chris Hogan, Julian Edelman, I mean, he did have Rob Gronkowski, I will give him that, but nobody can disagree in the fact that this offense is better than the Super Bowl he won with the Rams. Now, one can also look to the defense of that season and say, well, the Bucs don't have a good defense. It's something I like to point out is that a lot of people bring up the point per game defense for the Bucs and how they were so terrible at that. Well, here's the thing. Jameis Winston threw over 30 interceptions. it's a little hard to keep the other team from putting points on the board when they start at your 40-yard line on half of their drives. It's a little hard to defend against that. That means they got to go 15 yards and they get a guaranteed 3 points. So it's definitely a little tough for that Bucs defense. And I do believe that with Brady not only putting up points, but also not throwing 30 interceptions, that Bucs defense will be better than last year. Now, Brady has a stellar offense to work with, and the Bucs will definitely make a run for the Super Bowl. Do they make it? I don't know, but they will make a run for it. So then we move on to third in the NFC South, which are the Atlanta Falcons. Now, they didn't make a bunch of big-name signings, a lot of benchmen and second fillers, but they lost a few big-namers. Quarterback Desmond Trufant, running back Devontae Freeman, tight end Luke Stalker, and offensive tackle Tyson Braylow. Now, they also traded for tight end Hayden Hurst, which obviously they lost a lot, but I believe they will still hit their ceiling of 7-9. I don't see them going further than this. We saw them struggle a lot last year, and I think that will kind of repeat itself this coming season. And then you go to last in the NFC South with the Carolina Panthers. Now, they signed quite a few players. Let's go through this. They signed wide receiver Robbie Anderson. They got rid of Cam Newton. They signed XFL quarterback P.J. Walker. They signed unrestricted free agent defensive end Stephen Weatherly. They signed John Miller, Tahir Whitehead. They signed safety Justin Burris. They signed wide receiver Pharaoh Cooper. They acquired tackle Russell Okung for Trey Turner in a trade. They released safety Eric Reed, and they waived Garrett McGinn. They also agreed to terms with a free agent quarterback named Teddy Bridgewater on a 3-year contract. They also lost tight end Greg Olsen and signed wide receiver Ishmael Hyman. Now, the Panthers got better, but the quarterback didn't. The QB position will be the death of the Panthers, and similar to a team we talked about earlier, to be more specific, the Bears, the Panthers simply will not do well due to their quarterback position. There will be some controversy there. Teddy Bridgewater will eventually be benched, and he will eventually be replaced by XFL quarterback P.J. Walker. And there is a possibility that Kyle Allen will also be thrown into there at some point. They might even go through 3 quarterbacks in one season, but either way, the quarterback position is going to be the death of them. I have their ceiling at maybe 6-10, but I'm putting them at 4-12. That quarterback position is not going to help them. Now, moving to the NFC East. An interesting division here, because yet again, the team that wins has a very low record, the Eagles, at 9-7. They signed on Will Parks, a safety, linebacker Jagavis Brown, and D-tackle Jargon Hargrave. They traded for Darius Slay, a nice move for them. They've had a tough secondary, and Darius Slay is going to help that out. They had lost Jordan Howard, Darren Sproles, Nelson Aguilar, offensive tackle Vitae, cornerback Malcolm Jenkins, Jalen Mills. The Eagles are a good team, but they lost a ton of talent. And honestly, I was struggling with putting the Eagles somewhere more like 7-9, but then I thought about, look, they have a good coach, they have a great quarterback. Now, when looking at the Eagles, I think we need to analyze the entirety of the team. They recently haven't been able to hit their ceiling, but I see them following what they've done recently, going 9-7, and yet somehow winning their division. Now, this could be a flip-flop thing. This is something I'm a little more lenient on, is the Cowboys possibly winning. I have the Cowboys at 8-8 right now. Second in the NFC East. They could easily go 9-7 and win it, but they signed D-tackle Gerald McCoy. They signed a new kicker. They signed cornerback C.J. Goodwin. They signed that defensive tackle Dontari Poe. They signed safety Darian Thompson. They re-signed wide receiver Amari Cooper and put a franchise tag on Dak Prescott. So they got all their talent back, and the biggest thing for the Cowboys right now, which is why I'm so hesitant to put them higher than 8-8, because it's really a make or break type of thing. I don't really know how it's going to roll out with Mike McCarthy. I really don't. I mean, it's kind of unpredictable right now. I like the new coaching move, but if I had to bet my money on it, it's going to take more than one season for it to make a big impact. Expect more of the same of last year here, and expect maybe in the future, maybe after this first year, Mike McCarthy can make some big changes in Dallas and turn that team into a playoff running team yet again. Then we move on to third in the NFC East with the New York Giants at 7-9. Now, they didn't make any big signings, but they practically rebuilt their coaching staff with a new head coach in Joe Judge and a new offensive coordinator in Jason Garrett and several other in-house signings. But similar to the Cowboys, the new coaching staff will need a year to settle in. But expect both of these teams to make strides coming soon. The Giants have their man in Danny Dimes. I believe in him. And they have their new coaches. I believe that this team is going to pan out eventually. They have talent all over the place. They just need to put it together with the coaching staff. Then you move on to the final team in the NFC East with the Washington Redskins at 4-12. A very sad 4-12. They named Jack Del Rio their new defensive coordinator, and they signed on Ron Rivera as their new head coach. Now, similar again to the rest of the division, seems to be the big thing in the NFC South this upcoming season, or the NFC East this upcoming season, is that these coaches are not going to be able to turn around the team in a single offseason. It's going to take a year. It's going to take a year or two. But I do believe that these teams, the Giants, Redskins, Cowboys, it's going to be an interesting division. They're all getting better. Now, for the Giants and the Redskins, mainly through coaching staff, but they're getting better, and they're young teams that I believe can make big strides soon. Then we move on to the final division in the NFC with the NFC West. At number 1 in the NFC and in the NFC West, we have the Seahawks at 14-2. They signed offensive guard Chance Warmack and wide receiver Philip Dorsett to one-year contracts. They released Tedrick Thompson and tight end Ed Dixon. They signed offensive tackle Brandon Shell. They signed offensive tackle Cedric Oboy. They signed offensive tackle Brandon Shell and Cedric Oboy, as well as Chance Warmack. Now, the reason I just read those over again is because they got some nice O-line additions. Now, no superstars there, but it's nice to add some depth and to add some nice wiggle room for that offensive line. Now, they got some nice additions in wide receiver Philip Dorsett, but I feel like it's just the same Seahawks team. And with Metcalf in his second year, they will boom into the number 1 spot in the NFC. I believe they will ride Metcalf to the number 1 spot in the NFC. Metcalf is going to be great next year. Expect him to be one of the best wide receivers, if not the best, in the NFC. Then we move on to the Super Bowl loss 49ers at 12-4, second in the NFC West. They signed wide receiver Travis Benjamin and offensive lineman Tom Compton, but they lost Emmanuel Sanders. But they signed defensive lineman Alex Barrett and offensive lineman Jake Brendel and Jared Jones-Smith, but that does not add up to Emmanuel Sanders. He was a big part of that offense last year in the second half of the season. They kept a lot of the same team around, but they lost a key D lineman and a key wide receiver. The team is good, and it will remain good, but it will not beat out the Seahawks for the lead. Jimmy Garoppolo will make strides. He will continue to develop, but will only remain a good QB. Not a great one, just good. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's a solid quarterback, but he isn't a stardom quarterback. He doesn't have that X factor that you want in your franchise guy. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo's a franchise guy, don't get me wrong. Is he worth the money he's been paid? I don't know. He doesn't seem to have an X factor. You know, Patrick Mahomes has the X factor. He can extend a play and then bomb it down the field 60 yards. You know, Tom Brady has an X factor. He knows what's going to happen before the play starts. You look at Lamar Jackson. He can make a play with his legs. Aaron Rodgers, he can make a play with his legs as well. You look at those types of quarterbacks and you think they have an X factor that makes them worth the money. Does Jimmy Garoppolo have that? Look at his film and tell me. The Rams are at 9-7. They signed offensive lineman Andrew Whitworth to a 3-year contract. They lost Eric Weddle to retirement and Brandon Cooks in a trade. So they didn't play too hot last year. And simply, I don't think they made enough strides to become a better team. Now, they still do have a good chunk of the pieces they had from their Super Bowl run. And frankly, I could see them coming back from a down year to put up a positive record. But their ceiling, I believe, is at 9-7. And I have them right there. I believe in the Rams. They have a good coach. They have a good quarterback. But will they do better than that? I don't think so. Then we move on to last in the NFC West with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, not a ton of big name moves besides DeAndre Hopkins. The team did not improve enough for me to say that Kyler Murray is going to do much better than last year. I believe that DeAndre Hopkins will definitely help with that, don't get me wrong. And I don't think Kyler is going to be what kills him. I think it's going to be their defense. I think Kyler is going to do pretty solid. He's going to maybe 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, around 9-10 picks. It'll be a solid year for Kyler Murray. But I don't believe he's going to be something amazing just yet. I think he has that potential, but I don't think he's going to be there just yet. So that wraps it up for my NFC predictions. If we go ahead and look at the overall lineup of where these teams stand, obviously based on their overall records, we see number 1 in the NFC, the Seattle Seahawks at 14-2. Number 2 in the NFC, the Saints at 12-4. Number 3 in the NFC, the Packers at 11-5. Number 4 come the Eagles at 9-7. Number 5, the Buccaneers at 12-4. Number 6, the San Francisco 49ers at 12-4. Number 7, the Vikings at 11-5. So those 7 teams will make the playoffs. The Vikings will just scratch their way in. The Rams come just missing the playoffs at 9-7. Coming at 9, the Bears at 9-7. Coming at 10, the Cowboys at 8-8. Coming at 11, the Giants at 7-9. Coming at 12, the Falcons at 7-9. Coming at 13, the Lions at 4-12. Or 13, the Lions at 4-12. Coming at 14, the Washington Redskins at 4-12. At 15, the Panthers at 4-12, and at 16, the Cardinals at 4-12. A lot of 4-12 teams there, but that's how I see the NFC rolling out. There have been a lot of big changes, Brady, Emmanuel Sanders, a lot of big changes throughout the NFC, and I feel like it's going to be similar to last year in terms of who makes the playoffs, besides, of course, your exception of the Buccaneers. But I do believe that the playoffs are going to be where it really gets busy. You got a lot of really good quarterbacks. When we look at that top 7, you got Kirk Cousins, Jimmy Garoppolo, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Russell Wilson. You got some great quarterbacks in that top 7. And quite honestly, that is going to be a lot more fun of a playoff race to watch than the AFC. I mean, no bad credit to the AFC. They have some nice quarterbacks too. But let's list them off. Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson. But the Patriots is kind of unsure what's going to happen there. But Ryan Tannehill for the Titans, Minshew Mania for the Jaguars, and Josh Allen for the Bills. So quite obviously, the quarterback game is definitely in the NFC. And frankly, I believe whoever wins in the NFC is going to win the Super Bowl this year. Now, I just want to take an extra second here to talk about Tom Brady with the Buccaneers. Now, in order to really understand what might just happen here, we need to look at exactly why he left. Now, it all seemed to have started back 2 years ago when Bill Belichick attempted to trade Brady to San Francisco. Now, of course, Robert Kraft jumped on this right away and stopped it from ever happening, but I believe it really sparked Brady's inspiration to leave. I mean, you look back at that season, you have to remember all these ESPN articles about how, there's this big discourse between Brady, Belichick, and Kraft about how Kraft wants Brady because he's always loved Brady, and Brady has brought so much to the organization, but Belichick doesn't want Brady anymore. He wants to move younger. And honestly, I believe a little bit of that. I do believe a little bit of it. I don't believe all of it, but I do believe a little bit. I don't think there was any disrespect there, but I do believe that Brady was a little bit like, oh, okay, you don't want me anymore. That's fine, I understand. I mean, you look at towards Howard Stern interview. He had that big interview recently. I listened to the entirety of it. At one point, Howard Stern even asked him about it, and Brady said, I understand. Belichick's trying to get younger. I mean, you've got a 39 going on 40-year-old quarterback. You have to prepare for the future. Based on common history in terms of when quarterbacks stop being very good, I mean, it was in Belichick's best interest to be ready for when Brady was going to hit that cliff. I mean, only in history it's always shown that that's usually when it hits, if it hasn't hit already. Now, what ultimately completed Brady's urge to leave? I believe it was his want to have a solid offense. You got to look towards the Rams Super Bowl the year with the Patriots. They had a lot of offensive troubles. I mean, there were a lot of games where it seemed like they just couldn't make a first down happen if they had a gun to their head. Now, of course, in the playoffs, it turned around. But you look at this year, when Brady's best receiver for the majority of the year was an injured, under 6 foot, not insanely fast receiver in Julian Edelman, followed by a receiver who was learning the offense on the fly in Mohamed Sanu. And then they had Philip Dorsett. I mean, Philip Dorsett can't run a right route to save his life. He's not a good receiver. They did not have a good team this season. They didn't have a run game. He didn't have a good O-line. Didn't have a good receiving core. I think that really, really, really just broke it for him. And now he's got something to prove. We've seen over the course of history that whenever Brady has something to prove, he goes out and proves it. I mean, his whole career he's talked about how he has that chip on his shoulder about, I was picked 199th in the draft. Well, geez, you had to win 6 Super Bowls to prove him wrong? I mean, I think we got it when it was 1 Super Bowl. Okay, maybe he's worth a first-round pick, but I mean, geez. He definitely, I think, used that chip very well. And now he has something more to prove. The sound of people telling him he is a system quarterback, I believe that's going to push him to show the world that not only can he do it with a bad team and a good system, but he can do it with the Bucs as well. And quite honestly, I would not be surprised if they win a Super Bowl in these next few years. Expect Brady to play for another 3 seasons with a great offense, and expect the Buccaneers to at least, maybe not this year, maybe not even next, but expect the Buccaneers to win at least 1 Super Bowl during that stretch. Tom Brady is going to change the Buccaneers for the better. And quite honestly, he's going to bring them a Super Bowl. It's said, one of the Buccaneers coaching staff even said in an interview recently, the Bucs mindset is they got Brady to win a Super Bowl. Anything less than a Super Bowl is a failure. I mean, you only pay a guy $60 million guaranteed with the thought of, a quarterback especially, with the thought of, all right, we're going to use this to get to a Super Bowl. I mean, if you're paying a quarterback $60 million guaranteed, you're hoping he's going to bring you that next step to get to a Super Bowl. And that's what they're thinking with Brady. And quite honestly, I believe in it. I really, really do. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Remember, the full podcasts are always on Spotify. I've got shortened clips of the podcast, kind of split up. For this, I'm doing it by division. But shortened videos posted onto YouTube. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Save this if you're on Spotify or BuzzSprout. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for huddling up with me, and I will see you all next week.